So the opportunity here is to change our relationship to our identity from identification, being fixated on our identity, to having it be a resource for surviving and thriving. So when we talk about identification or fixation, this turns into attachment. We feel as if we just have to grab hold of that identity because that's all there is. Who would I be without my story, without my accomplishments, without my goals, without all the things that I own? Who would I be? And when we're in that place, then we're in a place that's vulnerable to suffering. The suffering that arises out of attachment to impermanence, to the reality of impermanence. Attachment in a world in which we have very little control, and there's a great deal of uncertainty. So the alternative is simply to have our story as a resource, a way of navigating life for surviving and thriving. So here's what we mean by surviving. This is about the basic biology that we have, these characteristics that we have for avoiding that which is harmful and approaching that which is beneficial. And we do this, as we mentioned the other day, largely on a reactive basis. It's either instinctual or it's habit. And this serves us very well. We don't need to be in the place of having to make a big decision every time we need to avoid that which is dangerous and approach that which is harmful. This is where the instincts and the habits serve us really well. We don't want to have to figure it out, rethink everything. Our lives would proceed at a snail's pace. Although on a sidebar, slowing down our lives might not be a bad thing either. But we won't do that today. So when we have avoid and approach as a resource, we use them skillfully, then we're in a good place. Versus when we are controlled by avoid and approach, when we're attached to it. Thriving is also in our biology, and these are our characteristics of inherent enoughness that have to do with awareness, self-regulation, and learning. And instead of this being reactive territory, these three characteristics we want to intentionally cultivate. We want to have an intention about how we cultivate our awareness, how we cultivate our self-regulation, and in particular, our learning. And so when we have an intention about expanding our awareness, about being more aware of what's going on, of how reactivity is showing up in our body, about how this is an opportunity to take a deep breath and self-regulate and not say what just popped into our heads. About how this is an opportunity to take a difficult situation and say, what can I learn from this? Or take a mistake we made and say, what's the learning here? As opposed to being self-critical. This is thriving. And where we put our attention to help us realize our intention can very much have to do with our meditation practice. And remembering that the power of meditation is in our ability to be aware of what we're noticing going on inside ourselves, noticing our thoughts, noticing our emotions, noticing the physical sensations as an observer, as the play-by-play announcer, as opposed to the color commentator who's constantly critical or overhyping. We're just observing. Oh, this is what's happening. This is how it is. This is how life is. This is my experience right now. When we're in that observer mode, we have space. And in that space, we get to choose. We get to make our choices. This is our space of personal freedom. So when we're in this place where we are using our story, our identity, as a resource, one of the ways that we can do that is to ask ourselves, what is possible for ourselves? I sent the email the other day, and again yesterday, with the quote from the book Kay's been reading that uses this phrase about how we're inclined to funnel our immense complexity into a reductive profile. I'm smart. I'm well-to-do. I'm privileged. I'm jealous. All of those things are reductive profiles. And what we know about ourselves is that we are immensely complex. In fact, I suspect for most of us, as it often is for me, my own complexity, the complexity of human beings, is daunting. Maybe that's one of the reasons we try to reduce it to something really simple. But when we do that, we're missing out. We are hiding from ourselves. The alternative is to have an ever-evolving story that arises out of curiosity. So, you've heard me say before about what a big experience it was for me when, as a very, very undersized freshman in high school, I went out for the basketball team and didn't make it. And how that story evolved over the last 60-some years to being a mindfulness teacher. How do you get from being the undersized basketball player? That was my story then. My story now is I'm a mindfulness teacher and curious. And as I look back at my life, one of the things that I did, and I have to give my experience growing up to my parents and others an immense amount of credit here. When somebody asked me a critical question, I was willing to listen and to take a chance. My phys ed teacher says, I saw that you didn't make the basketball team. Do you think you might be interested in coming out for the wrestling team? My roommate says, even though I'm in a semi-relationship with another girl who I'd been dating in high school and kind of revived the relationship, he says to me, do you think you'd like a blind date with my girlfriend's roommate? I had enough sense to say yes. When my finance professor in my MBA program said, have you ever thought about getting a PhD? I said yes. When I saw an advertisement in the Wall Street Journal for an economist at a local bank, I pursued it. And when Jonathan Faust said to me, have you ever thought about being a mindfulness teacher? I was willing to say yes. I was curious. Curiosity, being open to possibilities. This is how our stories evolve. And the more our stories are evolving, the more they are in motion and dynamic, the less likely we are to be attached to them. And less, of course, we get attached to the evolving itself. But that's another story. So let's do a little practice around this. So taking those deep breaths as a way of gathering our attention in this moment. And settling into the surface we're sitting on. And doing whatever works for you to open to possibilities. Allowing yourself to be in an open place. And initially opening to the phenomenon, the almost magical phenomenon of your breathing. And shifting your attention away from your breathing and offering yourself the following inquiry. What is important to you at this time? What gives you energy? What do you find fulfilling? Particularly paying attention as different possibilities arise to the amount of energy that goes with each one. To the ways in which each possibility gives you a sense of filled up, fulfillment. It doesn't have to be anything big. It doesn't have to be reinventing civilization. Just knowing what's important to you. And now taking 3 deep breaths. Filling your lungs from the bottom all the way up to your shoulders. Long in-breath. And when your lungs are full to your shoulders, holding that breath for 2 or 3 beats. And a long, slow out-breath. And again. All the way to the shoulders. Holding and slowly releasing. Feeling all of the tension and extra energy flowing away. And one more time. And resuming your normal breathing. And on each in-breath, feeling an expansion of your awareness of your physical being. Filling the space you're seated on. expanding your awareness to fill the room you're sitting in. Sensing a quality of opening physically and emotionally. Allowing for some curiosity as you inquire of yourself, how might what's most important to me lead to the evolving of my own story, my own identity? Being curious about what's most important to me might lead to the evolving of my own story. What's possible for me? How might I learn more about what's possible for me? What might I investigate? And taking a moment now to notice any sensations that are present in your body and resting with them. Really experiencing your bodily sensations at this moment of openness and curiosity. What intention might you form for evolving your story? What intention might be arising?